Birth and childhood. Whosoever knows the longing of a mother that a son shall be born to her, enters into the world where lived Bhuvneshwari Datta, the wife of Vishwanath Datta. In common with mothers the world over, she longed for a son to carry on the family tradition, to be the link, forged out of the materials of love and suffering, between the future and the past. As she went about her daily tasks, she prayed silently that her desire might be fulfilled. Now, it was customary in those days, and still is, for one living a long distance from Varanasi who was in dire need, or desirous that some special event should come to pass, to make offerings and sacrifices to Shiva through any relatives and friends who might be residents of Varanasi. So Bhuvneshwari Devi wrote to an old aunt of the Datta family in Varanasi to ask her to make the necessary offerings and prayers to Vireshwar Shiva that a son might be born to her. When word came that this was being done, she was content to wait in perfect assurance that the prayers would be answered. She spent her days in fasting and meditations, her whole soul given over to constant recollectedness. Her entire heart fixed in love on the Lord Shiva. Often did her mind go to Varanasi, uniting in thought with the venerable aunt as she poured the sacred water of the Ganga on the symbol of the Most High, or as she worshipped him with flowers and mantras. One night she had a vivid dream. She had spent the day in the shrine, and as evening deepened into night she fell asleep. Hushed in silence was the household, hushed in silence and rest. Then in the highest heavens the hour struck, the time was come for the saintly woman to touch the feet of the Lord. And in her dream she saw the Lord Shiva arouse himself out of his transcendent meditation and take the form of a male child who was to be her own son. She awoke. Could this ocean of light in which she found herself bathed be but a dream? Shiva, Shiva, thou fulfillest in various ways the prayers of thy devotees. From the inmost soul of Bhuvneshwari Devi a joyous prayer welled up, for she was confident that her long months of expectancy were over and that the vision was but an announcement that her prayers were to be answered. Her faith was justified. And in due time her son was born. The light of the world dawned for the first time upon the future Swami Vivekananda on Monday, 12th January 1863. It was the holy hour of dawn, just 6 minutes before the sunrise. At the time of his birth the constellation Sagittarius was rising in the east, the moon was in the constellation Virgo, the planet Jupiter was in the 11th house, and Saturn was in the 10th from that of his birth. It was the 7th day of the new moon in the month of Posh, which is the 9th month of the Bengali year, and as chance would have it, it was the day of Makra Sankranti, a great Hindu festival. The millions of men and women who were observing the festival unconsciously greeted the newborn babe with prayers and worship, little thinking that he who was to usher in a new age of glory and splendor for his country, who was to reorganize the spiritual and national consciousness of Hindustan and become a great apostle, another Saint Paul, preaching unto the world the gospel of another redemption, the message of Vedanta, had, on that day, first seen the light. And only a few miles north of Calcutta, in the garden of Dakshineswar, there waited one for the coming of this babe who was to grow up and carry on his great work. Of which more later. The infant grew and the time came when he had to be named. Some suggested that it should be Durga Das after the grandfather who had renounced the world. But the mother said, let it be Vireshwar, after the aspect of Shiva which she worshipped before the child's birth, and Vireshwar it was. They called him Bile for short. Later, Vireshwar became Narendranath. Narendranath was a naughty child, subject to fits of restlessness during which he was beyond control. At such time he would wear the family out.
Bring it on. इंसाफ सिर्फ गुनहगार को सजा देना नहीं होता है, बेगुनाह को सजा से बचाना भी इंसाफ का पहलू है।
beyond control. At